Thanksgiving when I was a kid, and maybe for some of you, was a little different than we might know it today, right? When I was a kid, anyway, the story was simple. The Pilgrims came on the Mayflower, and they came to New England to face this harsh winter, and there was famine. But the Native Americans, they came and they saved the day, and now they all celebrated, and so do we. Simple. And so we had pilgrims and Indians in school. We had those black square Capitan hats, right? And buckles on everything. You always had to make a buckle in school for some reason. And of course, the paper feathers. And it's a good, wholesome, uplifting story, if not also not very PC for today, right? And I think for a very good reason. For good reasons, many of them, right? It reduces people to their stereotypes, and it whitewashes history. As Dr. David J. Silverman, professor of history at GW, teaches, the Wampanoags, who are the Indians in this tale, have long contended that the Thanksgiving myth sugarcoats the viciousness of colonial history for Native people. It does, he says. The Pilgrims did not enter an empty wilderness ripe for the taking. He continues, the Pilgrims got here, but there was already a civilization here. Actually, multiple civilizations. This was not the first contact, but one of many between Europeans and indigenous Americans. And the story skips all the diseases and the wars and the slavery and on and on. Now, I know Thanksgiving was yesterday, but many of us still have family here, or we're still celebrating through the weekend, or we just kind of hold the whole weekend as one. So I know it was for yesterday, but we're still in that mindset. And so what do we do, or at least I am, what do we do when we confront the real history of Thanksgiving with the myth that our society has created? What happens when these two stories clash? What do? Well, as modern Jews, we know what to do because we see it in our Torah portion and we handle it well. So we're in Parshat Vayetze. The story turns from Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Esau to focus in on Jacob and his growing family. He flees his parents' home. He has the dream with the ladder. He meets Rebekah, who works for 7 years to marry her, accidentally marries the wrong sister, marries Leah, and so he has to do it all over again, gets to marry Rebekah. But he finally leaves at the end of the portion a wealthier man with a family, and he continues his journey. And during this story, we hear about 11 of Jacob's 12 sons, plus his daughter Dinah. And the sisters, Leah and Rachel, and their handmaids each have these children, and each son, not Dinah, gets an origin for their name. So as each son is born, the Torah says why they got their name. So for Reuben, for example, it's from the root to see. And it says, Ki ra'ah Adonai ba'oni, the Eternal has seen my affliction, and so Reuben and Ra'ah come together. Or Judah comes from praise. It says, Hapa'am odeh et Adonai, odeh, I will praise the Eternal, and so Judah, odeh. The Torah goes into detail, not great detail, but goes into detail, naming each son and why they get their name. And it makes sense. These sons are the ancestors to they're the ancestors to the 12 tribes, right? And the Torah wants to emphasize that each son is a son of Jacob, and therefore each son is a part of Israel. But the challenge is that this is not quite historically accurate. According to Rabbi Gunther Plaut, a 20th century biblical commentator, he says that the ancestral figures have been seen as the projections of later generations from the period of the judges onward, meaning that the later Israelites reframed their story, explaining their origins in ways that made sense to them, right? They personified history, the Israelites, and so they, like we, connect these characters to their past. Or as he puts it, the Torah is answering questions for ancient Israel that in different form are asked by most groups. Who are our ancestors? How did we come to have our tribal and national structure? We're modern Jews, and so we hold both, right? We study the history of our religion and our people, and we acknowledge that the Bible doesn't always reflect history, but often memory or story. And yet, even as we know that the Torah does not lay out things exactly as they happened, we still retell the stories because they shape who we are and how we live our lives. We study both history we both study history and we retell our mythical stories. And so I think we can do the same with Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving weekend. And so I encourage each of us to recognize the origin of the holiday with its pain and its bloodshed, to acknowledge the carnage and the disasters that the Wampanoags and many other Native Americans faced. Maybe even next year around your tables, you can lift some of these up. And even as we see the real history, let's also use the holiday and the weekend to lift up why the holiday of Thanksgiving still really matters. Because we still celebrate our American memory, even if we also highlight the truth. We still lift up that value of gratitude. As Jews and as Americans, finding gratitude is just so important right now because times are tough, right? There's divisive American politics and a war in Israel-Palestine, personal conflicts in our private lives, maybe with family or at work or with finances or facing illness. And yet there is still so much to be grateful for. If only we tell that story and if only we lift up that value of gratitude. This is what it means to be a modern Jew and a modern American, to wrestle with our painful history and to embrace the symbolic meanings of our stories. And so we're going to do that exactly now. Well, we're going to do half of that right now. We're going to share some gratitude as we do every week. And for each one, we'll say, Modim anachnu lach. So what's something that you're grateful for, big or little? And for each thing, we'll say Modim anachnu lach, and you can share online in the chat box as well. Karen. Yes, for all the hostages that were released today, we say Modim anachnu lach. And I was going to do this later, but we can do now. We'll say actually a prayer. There's a short prayer that we say in the morning blessings, Nisim B'chol Yom, that ends Matir Asurim, who frees the captive. So it's blessed are you, Adonai our God, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Matir Asurim, who frees the captive. So let's say that together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Matir Asurim. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who frees the captive. Amen. For other things, yeah. That's great. So for bonding with family, where it's been a little contentious in the past, but here we are, and so we say Modim anachnu lach. That's great. So for being with your son, you said, and his family, and his in-laws, we say Modim anachnu lach. Jeremy Mendelson says he's grateful for being home with his parents and seeing high school friends too. Modim anachnu lach. Grateful for awesome family. Modim anachnu lach. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulcha na'el lehodot. We praise you, Adonai, whose nature is goodness and to whom we give thanks and praise.